Hey guys, James from Crowdrender here. Hope you're doing well. Thank you for watching our video. Now, I'm going to say this at the beginning of the video. If you like what you see, please subscribe. Normally I do that at the end of the video, but maybe I talk too much and we kind of lose a few people. So I'm doing it up the front. We do our best to make videos which we hope you get value out of and help you to do what you love doing best. Now, this video has some exciting news in it. 0.1.2 has been released. Yay! And it's free and you can go to our website and just download it. All you need to do is create yourself a site account, which is email, password, or if you can't stand the thought of yet another email password combination, you can use Facebook and Google to log in as well. I want to say a huge thank you to the 250-ish people who have registered to test the alpha. You gave us feedback. It helped immensely in making 0.1.2 possible. So thank you. Now don't go anywhere, stay in that testing program because we're going to give you early access to 0.1.3. It's going to be coming out in about late Jan, early February next year, and it's going to have a whole bunch of new features, more stable, more awesome stuff. And if you like bleeding edge software and you're not in the testing program, we've left the registrations open so you can still jump in there and enjoy early access to awesome free new software. Now the rest of this video is pretty much just us showing you how to install and use the new 0.1.2 version, so let's get into it. Okay guys, we're going to get straight into it with installation. I'm on a Macintosh. I'm going to show you how to install on Mac first, and then we're going to do Windows. Okay, so first things first, let's go over to File, User Preferences. And I'm going to show you the case first where you've already got Crowdrender installed. So first thing you're going to have to do is you're going to have to remove it, and you have to do this on every computer you want to use it on. If you've got a pre-existing version of Crowdrender, if you've been testing, then you definitely need to remove it. So the first thing I'm going to go ahead and do is just go ahead and remove it. Okay, so once it's been removed, now we can go and install a new one. So you hit this button, Install Add-on from File, real easy. And then I go to my downloads. I've kept my downloads folder as a favorite, just so it's really easy to come here and get all the files I've downloaded. So I'm going to give you a link in the description below so you can go over to our website and grab the latest version. And all you have to do is highlight that file wherever you save it on your hard drive, and then you just hit Install Add-on from File, and then it installs it, and then you can just hit Enable. And when it enables, you should see a couple of things. You should see this little sign pop up, although it could actually be hidden behind the User Preferences window. And you should also, if I close that, see that we've got a new panel here called Crowdrender with all the controls for Crowdrender in it. So that's pretty much installation on Mac, and it also works exactly the same way on Linux. So the Unix-based operating system is really easy. Windows, unfortunately, is a little bit more problematic. So let's cover Windows next. So same thing, we're going to go over to our User Preferences. If I can actually make my mouse go there. Cool, User Preferences. And the first problem you're going to encounter is if you've got a pre-existing installation and you've currently got Crowdrender enabled, and you come over and hit Remove. Let's do that now. So hitting Remove, click OK, and boned. Oh no, traceback. So there's an error here, and you can't read it either for some reason on this machine, like it's all the way over here. I can't read the error. And clicking in the grey mass doesn't help either. It doesn't make it go away. So you have to sort of come down here and find this little tiny little sliver of grey and click there. And then, oh, now I can see, but you can't remove it. Even if you disable it and you try clicking remove, that still doesn't work. Now, I'm not going to give you the gory details of why it does this. I'm just going to tell you how to get around it. So you've got to save your user settings with it not enabled. So let's do that. So you save your user settings with it not enabled. Oh, crap. Turn it off. Sorry about that. Yep, save user settings just to double check. And then you just close down Blender and then restart it. And now if we go back into User Preferences, type Crowdrender, now you can find that you just hit Remove and it works. And that's pretty much exactly the same thing as for Mac or Linux. You just go to Downloads or wherever you want to save this. It's up to you where you want to put stuff. I just find Downloads convenient because that's where downloads end up. And then just click the file that you downloaded, and then just go Install Add-on from File. Scroll up, and then again click that button, and the sign is somewhere behind the User Preferences window again. But there you go. It says success, so that's done. And just to double check, you'll find the Crowdrender panel is usually somewhere down the bottom if you haven't saved your startup file like I have with it at the top. And it might be a little bit too narrow, so just widen that so you can see it easily. There is just one more issue I'd like to talk about with Windows, and that's you might get an error that looks a little bit like this when you enable it. And if you get an error that looks like this, chances are you've got some Windows DLLs which are missing. So the key thing to look for is this import error DLL load failed, and also this last line here is usually exactly the same in each case that we've come across. So what's missing is a couple of Windows system DLLs, so I'll show you how to find them. You just come into Explorer, you go to Windows, you go into your system folders, so either System32 or syswow64. So if you're on a 64-bit machine, come in here and have a look. And what you're missing is MSVCP, so you type this in as a search, and you'll notice, well, hopefully you'll notice you've got MSVCP140.dll. This file will be missing. You'll probably have something like 120 or 110 or 60 or one of these other ones, but you need 140.dll. You also need concrt. You also need concrt140.dll. If those are missing, or either one of them is missing, you're likely to get that error. So the fix for this is actually quite easy. All you have to do is go over to your trusty web browser and then paste in this link, which I will leave in the description below. So this is just a Microsoft update, and it's going to give you the files that you need. And when you get here, you might see a few ads. They put an ad banner there, I guess, just in case you've got the urge to upgrade your computer while you're installing some updates. And this is what you need, that update there. And you just hit download, and then just install it. You don't even need to restart your machine. I think all you need to do is just restart Blender once you've installed it, and then you should find that it enables fine. So that's pretty much it for installation. And once you see that you've got the Crowdrender panel up and running, it pretty much means that your machine's ready to go. And that means we're going to get on to the next section, which is all about getting started using it. Alrighty then, let's get into some of the fun stuff. So we've installed the add-on now, and the next thing we're going to do is set up a group of computers to actually use it. So hopefully you've got at least two, maybe a few more computers to do this on, and they should all have Crowdrender installed and enabled. So we're just going to go through and do a little check just to make sure we're ready to go. And I recommend you do this every time you start your little swarm of computers as well. So we're going to go to File, User Preferences, and make sure Crowdrender is enabled, which it is. You can also save user settings with enabled, so you don't have to keep restarting it every time you turn Blender on, which is kind of handy. And just check that you've got the Crowdrender panel up. If it's there, then it's working properly. The next thing we're going to do is go over to the other computers. So I've got two Windows PCs running Windows 7, and we're all running Blender 2.79 today. And just check they're on the right network, check that the Crowdrender panel is there, which it is, which is really good. Yeah, okay, it's there as well on this other machine, and they're on the same network, which is awesome. Only last check you might want to think about is firewalls. Now, if you're on Windows and Mac, you'll have probably already taken care of that. Windows and Mac give you a notification the second you enable Crowdrender that says, do you want to let Blender access your network? And you should say yes, and that automatically configures it to work with Crowdrender. If you're on Linux, we'll leave some resources in the description below that will help you get it set up, because Linux, I don't think, does that. It's certainly not on the Ubuntu build I use. It hasn't given me a notification. Awesome. So next thing we're going to do is actually start adding those computers to what we call the master. So this computer I'm on now, where I'm moving stuff around, where you do your modeling, where you do your rendering from, this is the machine I call the master or the client. Master or client node perhaps, and then this panel in here is where you put in your render nodes, which are the other computers that can help you out. And the way you do that is pretty simple. You come down here and you hit the add button, and then you're going to add computers according to their computer name. Now if you don't know what a computer name is, it's not your username, by the way. It's a name that you give the computer when you first set it up. If you don't know how to do that on your operating system, again, check the description. I'll leave some links to resources that will help you go find what it is. Essentially, using a computer name is awesome because the computer name never changes, but the IP address does. Okay, so I'm going to explain something to you about what I just did. I put in the computer name, which is actually this first bit. I'll highlight for you. That's the computer name of another machine I've got. Then this .local bit, you need this if you're using a Unix-based operating system. So if you are using macOS or Linux, every computer you add here, whether it's Windows, macOS, Linux, doesn't matter, has to have .local after it. Now contrast that to Windows. If we go over to the Windows machine, it doesn't need to have the .local if it's connecting to another Windows machine. So Windows to Windows, it doesn't need .local. You can see down here, Render PC is one of these two computers. There it is, Render PC. that is also Windows. It doesn't need the .local, but other machines which are running Unix-based operating systems will still need the .local, even if you're connecting from a Windows machine to it. Hope that makes sense. So once you've added in the computer name, you can just hit connect. And I'm just going to highlight each of these machines with the mouse and just hit the connect button. And you'll see there that the first one's already synced. So they go through a little startup phase where they go connected, then uploading the file, and then syncing and then synced. Now, with a default file, it happens so quick you might not even see it. And pretty much that means once they reach the sync state, you can actually render with them straight away. You just hit the render button. So pretty much the next thing I want to show you is this panel here. I think it's actually really nice because it has a very great cool feature. So what you can do with it is you can save a group of default nodes. So you can actually come in here and go save startup file when you've actually put your computers in here, and it will save a default set. So you'll notice if I go and restart the startup file, then these computers stay here and I don't have to keep putting the names in, which is really good. I don't like having to type too much. Now, if you go and open another file, another cool feature is you can have project-specific sets or groups of nodes in here. So I've actually saved a different computer into here just to demonstrate that. You'll notice that James's MacBook Pro isn't in this list, but if I come back to that file, yeah, there it is. So this enables you to basically have specific sets of computers for specific projects. So if you maybe have a file that just won't render on GPUs, you can set up a group of computers which have powerful CPUs, and they can be the machines that render for that particular project. Alright, so the next thing I want to go through is just edits. So once you've connected your computers, you can actually make a few edits without having to upload your blend file. So if you notice, if I'm moving this around, this thing is just saying synced. I'm not having to upload the blend file. Occasionally you'll see it go to syncing and then back to synced, but pretty much I'm doing all this without needing to upload the blend file, so I can make a whole bunch of edits. I can change colors and stuff. I can change colors, and then it all remains synced, and then when I render it, I'm rendering on 4 computers really fast, well, faster than I normally would be able to anyway. And that one's a bit slow. And there you go. Okay, so you can make a bunch of edits without needing to upload your blend file, but there will be some that you can't make without having to upload the file. We're not actually supporting all of Blender's edit features yet, so there could be some modeling you want to do and it's not going to work. So adding a mesh, for example, you'll get this message sync failed. Now if you get that message, don't worry, there's a really easy way to fix it. You use this button, which is called the resync button, and that just uploads the whole blend file again. This means you want to be a bit smart about how you set up your projects. You probably want to do all your modeling and texturing and stuff first, and then just leave tweaking till the end. Because if you keep adding meshes and keep changing meshes, you're going to have to keep uploading your file, and if your file's huge, it's going to take a lot of time. Like the default scene uploads in seconds, whereas if I go over to this other file, which is about 90 megs, and I hit resync, you'll notice that it does take a little bit longer. So this is 90 megabytes or so times 3. Okay, cool. So you might notice something a little strange here. This computer's gone above 100%, which is a bit weird. No need to panic. The code that we wrote to transfer the files, it did have a little bit of a quirk in it, which we haven't yet corrected. However, it does actually have a useful side effect. So what it means is basically it lost a few fragments of the file in transit, and it transmitted them again. It kind of serves as a proxy for how good your connection is. So the more bits of the file you lose, the higher this goes, because it's having to double up sending those fragments again. I'm on a Wi-Fi network here. Wi-Fi networks aren't the best for doing a lot of file transfer. I'm typically seeing with lots of machines connected, you'll get to maybe 110, maybe 120% even. If your link is totally broken, then you'll see it just keep climbing. It will eventually get there, but it's a sign that if you're going above like 120, 30, 40, 50%, then you really need to go and check your network and make sure, like you're not getting really poor Wi-Fi reception, or a network cable is not like chewed to bits by a rodent or something. Okay, so we've gone through installing, we've gone through getting yourself set up, doing some connections, and a little bit of rendering. So in the next section of the video, we're going to get into rendering in a lot more detail. We're going to look at stills, we're going to look at animations, we're going to look at how it works with compositing, and it's going to be rad. Alright everybody, it's time for the exciting stuff. Here we go, we're going to do some rendering. Okay, so I'm going to just explain a little bit how our renderer works. So you've got our render controls over here, which do pretty much the same thing as Blender's own render controls, except these ones allow you to do the distributed rendering, whereas these controls, they just do rendering on one computer. Okay, so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 computers that are connected and synced. So these guys are actually ready to render. Before I do any rendering though, I just want to, how many times can I say render in the one part of the video? You're going to hear it a lot. Sorry if it's annoying you. Okay, so you just use Crowdrender as if you were using Blender really, because all of these settings, which you'll notice are actually Blender settings. This is the Crowdrender panel, that's it. There aren't any additional settings you need to configure. You just use Blender as normal. So if you wanted to change the percentage of the frame size, you can do that. These changes are all propagated automatically to all the other computers. So anything you can change in here, vis-a-vis render settings like tile size or any of the options here, that's all going to be sent across to the other nodes in the background without you having to do anything. And you don't even have to upload the file again. It's all done in real time. So now we can just go ahead and just do a quick test render. And I'm going to do this in slot 1, then we'll do slot 2. I'll change something just so you can see that this is actually real, like settings do update on the fly. Okay, so just waiting for this to finish. Sorry, my computer's not the fastest either. Okay, cool, so we've got an image. We're going to make a change now just to demonstrate how this live update works. So I'll just crank this up to 100% and render it just so we can satisfy ourselves that this whole live update thing is real and actually works. Okay, cool. So we've finished rendering it in 1080, and we can now actually tell just by hitting the J key. I mean, you can also go in here and do this. You can hit the J key and it will swap between all the slots that you've actually got rendered. And we can see that, yeah, it did in fact change the frame size. And you can do that with pretty much everything else as well, like all these settings, including, which I'll demonstrate in a moment, all of the layers, all the passes. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open another file and we're going to look at denoising. I just wanted to mention denoising specifically because normally when you render with denoising on, you can see this sort of other little process following the render process around cleaning up. So that's the denoising pass. And obviously in this render, because I'm only using one machine, the denoising is only done on one machine as well. So it's all done on the processor of this computer I'm screencasting from. Okay, I'm going to cancel that now. So we have the option to include denoising as well. Now I'm going to do the whole slot render thing. So the first time I'm going to render it without denoising and we're going to compare. I'm going to show you how Crowdrender does it. So we're just going to do a little render. I'll speed the render up as well so you don't have to sit through watching the whole thing. Oh, actually that was quite fast. Maybe I won't bother. Cool. I guess that helps when you've got lots of computers rendering. Alright, so you can definitely tell, look, there is no denoising on this. It looks horribly noisy. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to turn denoising on. And again, just demonstrating that, even these settings in here, which are on a different tab, they're all live updated. So we're just going to redo this now with denoising on. And while it renders, I'll just let you know that the denoising pass, or algorithm, I don't know what to call it, I think it's a pass, is actually done on each node separately. So it speeds that up as well because the denoising part is distributed too. Okay, there you go. So if we hit the J key again, you can see that Crowdrender has distributed the rendering and the denoising. And the good thing to note is you can't see any joins. And we worked quite hard to make sure that it would actually recompile the image without you being able to see any gaps in it. Okay, so that's denoising. Alright, so the next thing I want to talk about is compositing. So we're going to go back to just a default scene. I'm not going to do anything fancy. I'm going to do something really simple, something within my skill level. So what we're going to do is set up just a very simple scene to do compositing. So I'm just going to make sure we've got a material on the cube. So I'm going to go into my node editing or compositing view, look at the materials view, and I can see here, okay, cool, I've got a shader. Now, to demonstrate how compositing works, I'm going to add just more than one shader. I'm going to add an emission pass. I'm going to add an add shader. Just because I want to have more than just the diffuse pass to play with. And I'm going to make this kind of blue and very bright. And if I turn on the render view, okay, I can see that's working. Cool. All right. So normally you're probably used to compositing, which if I turn compositing on, when you do something like, with the Blender render or cycles, you render the image, and then the image will appear in this render layers node. And then what you can do is you can come over to this tab and you can select passes to add. So at the moment we've just got the depth, alpha as a default, and I think combined. So all the passes that you want to add will end up on this render layers node, and then you can plug them through the compositor. I'm sure if you've done this before, you'll be more than familiar with this. But I wanted to go over this because Crowdrender at the moment is dealing with a workaround to this process because it doesn't work. The reason for that is currently Blender can't import multi-layer OpenEXR files, which is how we transfer the render results around. Now it can open them as an image. What I'm talking about is it can't import them into the render engine. Okay, so what's going to happen is if we render now, just render still. Oops, we have a sync failure. Okay, let's cancel that. All right, so what I probably should have mentioned as well is if you build a shader, oh no, it says it's synced, that's weird. If you build a shader, that data isn't actually sent across. So we're going to resynchronize this just to be sure. And now we're going to render it. Okay, so we've got what we think we want. Now I want to actually add some passes to start playing with this. Okay, so if we add an emission pass, we can see there it is. We probably have to re-render it though, so let's just re-render it just to make sure. Okay, so there's the emission pass. And now what you'd normally do is you want to just check out that that pass is actually there. So let's do that. So let's look at the emission pass. We'll plug it into the viewer. We'll use backdrop. And it's black. Dang, what happened? Okay, so this is the problem I was talking about. Because Blender can't import multi-layer, multi-pass OpenEXR files into the render engine, when we load that image in, all it's got is just the single combined pass. And you can see what that is by just coming down here. You can see slot 1, composite combined. That's all there is. So if you go to the render layer and you hit emit, it's going to be black. Because all we can actually shove into the render engine through its API is just this one flat image. So we have a workaround for this, because obviously not being able to do compositing would be kind of limiting. So what we do is we have this different mode. You check this checkbox, enable layers, passes, and compositor. Don't press the button yet. This make compositor nodes comes after you've rendered. So then we render with this checkbox enabled. Again, apologies for this workaround, it's actually temporary. We've got a method currently in development to actually get around this and restore how it usually works, but it's not working yet. So stay tuned, we're going to make an update that's going to repair this. Okay, so now that it's finished rendering, all we have to do to finish the process is to click Make Compositor Nodes, and this button is going to generate a set of group nodes, each which looks a little bit like a render layers node. So if we come across to the render view now, if we come across the compositor, you'll notice there's a new node which has been added automatically by Crowdrender. It gets added when you click this button. And if you notice it, what we're going to do is we're going to basically compare now the two. So I'm just going to basically add an output, a split viewer so we can see the difference, and we're going to look at the emission from the normal process and the emission from this one. And sorry, they are out of order. I promise to fix that. And now we're going to look at the backdrop, and you can actually see as we slide this back and forth, you can see that Crowdrender is the image here. So this is, sorry, not Crowdrender, our group node, which mimics the render layers node, which works in a fairly similar way. That's on the left, and on the right is the normal render layers node. So this mechanism is how we're working around this limitation with Crowdrender at the moment. As I said, we're developing a full integration, which means you won't need this group node or this set of controls here eventually. But for the time being, you can use them to do compositing. It's fairly intuitive to use. It looks pretty much exactly the same. The only problem is you might have out of order passes here compared to up here. The only time that might irritate you is if you're using an existing file and you have to reconnect this, which apologies for you having to do that. You can actually also come in here, like tab into this node and just see what we've done. Because if you have a problem, you can actually come into this and fix it manually. So all this is basically, if I go into full screen and just show you it, this is basically a big spaghetti node network. And all it's doing is basically taking each individual image tile. So if we zoom in, you can actually see the image tiles that come back, which at the moment are strips, and they'll eventually be like little square tiles like you normally see. And basically it takes each of these images and then stitches them all back together using things like mix nodes or math nodes depending on the channel, and then just puts them all into one output node here. So if you see, here's the output node, the group output node, and that's what corresponds to these outputs here. So that's pretty much the workaround for compositing. Done. Okay, so last thing I want to talk about is load balancing. Ooh, exciting stuff. So the load balancer, pretty much its job is to make sure that when you render, sorry, that keeps moving. When you render, all of these machines finish in more or less the same time. So I'm just going to go back to my startup file. So essentially I want to teach you a little bit how this works, just so that you can get the most out of it. And okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up just a quick test that will show you what happens. So the first time you use Crowdrender, on any scene, it doesn't really know anything about the scene. It doesn't really know anything about your computers. It makes an educated guess off the number of cores, and then the number of processing cores you have in each machine, and then it tries to sort of apportion the screen like that, which obviously doesn't help if you're using GPU rendering. And it kind of uses that as a first guess. And you'll notice I've skewed the scene intentionally because one or two of these computers are going to finish later than the others, particularly this guy here. I think he's probably rendering something over there and has a lot of work to do compared to the the computers that were rendering the background over on this side. So what the load balancer does then is it tries to reapportion the load intelligently between all the computers. And it might take 2 or 3 renders. So we're going to basically test. So that was 35 seconds. We're going to go to slot 2, we're going to do it again. And we're just going to see how the load balancer behaves on subsequent renders. And hopefully it's actually going to try and get this scene a little bit more balanced. Okay, so that went from, if I just do the whole J thing, 35 seconds down to 24 seconds. We're just going to do it one more time. There you go, so 20 seconds. So we went from 35 seconds down to about 20 seconds just from doing a couple of renders. We did nothing else. And that shows how the load balancer is starting to learn how best to divide up the work between all the different computers. So if you just open Crowdrender and just hit render and it hasn't given you a very good time saving, recommend that you perhaps turn down your settings. So you could do something like this. Maybe turn down your settings to, 40% of the scene, and then just do a few sort of test renders until the time stops dropping. And you see that all these computers are finishing more or less equal to each other. Once you've done that, then Crowdrender should have picked up enough information about what's going on to be able to balance a big render. So then you can come back here and turn all your settings up, so you can crank up the resolution to 1080 or even 4K if you're feeling very, very brave, or just have lots and lots of time on your hands. You can crank up your samples to what you think is roughly going to be production quality, and pretty much do your final render. Alright, so the next thing I want to talk about is, if I just bear with me while I just look for some files. So we're going to look at some issues with external files. Now, external files are sadly not supported in 0.1.2. That's going to be hopefully in 0.1.3, which will be out in late January, early February. We're working pretty hard to get that fixed up because we know that's a pretty crucial feature of Blender to be able to use external textures, cache files, and blend assets. But I want to show you what it looks like when it does go wrong, just so that you can spot it and you can do a couple of things. So I'm just going to set this rendering here while I talk about it. So this file is called Classroom. It's available from blender.org. It's kind of a benchmark / test scene. I'll put a link to it in the description below, so if you want to repeat this test, you can. I'm using it today to basically demonstrate what happens when Crowdrender tries to render something which has external textures and external meshes. So you're gonna see exactly what that looks like. And if you get that in your scene, there's a couple of things you can do. You can either try and pack the external textures or cache files into the blend file. The other approach you could take is if you know how to do it, and I'll put some resources in the description below to help you do this, you can set up a shared folder on your network. And then you can go into your blend file and you can link to those external files from within your blend file. And then as long as all those other computers can access that shared folder, then you should be able to do distributed rendering with Blender and not have to pack things into the blend file. Okay, so the render's finished and it looks weird. So we've got pink everywhere, we've got furniture missing. It's like some crazy kleptomaniac like pixies came in, painted the room pink and nicked all the furniture, and it's just odd. So what happened? So we can see here that you've got a strip here which is actually rendered properly. And this was the machine that I'm screencasting from, which actually has all the external dependencies on it. So this machine was able to access all the right files and render the scene with all the furniture in it. Whereas these other patches were rendered by the other computers which don't have access to those files. And pretty soon we'll have a proper integrated solution for this, which means you won't have to bother setting up shared folders or network attached storage. So far we've talked about what happens when everything is going well, things are rendering really fast, and you're just generally happy, and then all of a sudden something happens and stuff breaks. So what do you do then? Well, it depends on what the problem is. So one of the issues we get asked about a lot actually is connection, just getting two machines just to connect up and cooperate and do stuff. So if you can't get a connection, I'm going to go through some of the things you want to check. So first up, have you used the right computer name? Have you spelled it correctly? If you put the wrong computer name in, what you'll find is when you press connect, it'll think about it for a little bit, trying to resolve that name to an IP address it can use, and then it goes, I don't know, is it this one? I'm just going to guess, but I haven't been able to resolve it. and it throws up this box, and basically you're thinking, oh, what is the IP address? So if you know the IP address, you can type it in manually, but perhaps you're thinking, well, I used to be able to just type in the name and connect. So one of the things to do is to check the spelling. Also, check that if you're on a Unix-based system, you put .local after it and that's spelled correctly. If you're on Windows, however, it's a little bit more tricky. Remember, if you're connecting to another Windows machine from a Windows machine, then no .local, get rid of it, it's going to break it. But if you are on a Windows machine and you're connecting to a Unix-based OS like Linux or Mac, then you still need it. So the next thing to check would be if you can put the IP address in, oops, sorry, wrong one. If you can put the IP address into the little box and then get it to connect, then you should be okay. So if you press connect and you put the right IP address in here and you pressed OK and it still doesn't work, what do you do then? Well, first thing I would do is basically check and make sure, am I on the right network? Have I changed networks while having Blender and Crowdrender open? If you've done that, you might need to restart Blender on this on whatever computer you're working on to make it work. The other thing you want to do is basically make sure that all your render nodes are actually on the same network as well, and also that they've got Crowdrender running. So how can you tell if Crowdrender is running properly? Well, one thing, you should see the Crowdrender panel, so that should be there. Another thing to check is if you look at either Activity Monitor, Process Monitor, Windows Task Manager, something that just show you processes. You should have at least 3 Blender processes. One is the graphical user interface for Blender. Then there should be 2 other processes, and they're basically background processes which act like servers, helping you connect to other computers. Let's just assume that you've checked all this. You know, you're running Blender on all the computers, Crowdrender's enabled and it's switched on, you've got all your processes, and as far as you can tell, they're on the same network. What else could possibly be wrong? One thing to check would be your firewall settings. If you haven't already seen it before, then when you enable a new program that needs network access, Windows or Macintosh will pop up a pop-up that asks you if it's okay for that machine or that program to access the network, and it will look a little bit like this. And if you just click allow, and this works on either Windows or Mac, then that'll be fine. Now for Linux users, sorry, you got the short end of the stick again. Unfortunately, Linux, I don't think, or at least the flavors of Linux I use don't put up a pop-up, and you have to go and configure the firewall manually. So we'll put some resources in the description below which will help you do that, because it's going to take up too much of the video if I do it here. So if you've checked all that, your firewall's good, everything's running, and it's still not connecting, I mean, what else could be the problem? Well, if you've managed to do all of that and you've confirmed that everything is as it should be, then chances are you might have actually found a real bona fide issue with Crowdrender. In that case, you might want to actually tell us about it and get in contact with us for support. So how would one do that? Well, quite easy really. You just truck on over to our website. I'm just going to show you how to do this now. So you come over to our website, you click Get Help. You could either go to the forum to see if anyone else has had an issue, but if you just want to get straight to it, you can just click on Report a Problem. And in Report a Problem, and in Report a Problem, you'll see there's a little tab here. And if you click this tab, it opens up a form, and then you can tell us all about the issue, and then we can do something about it. So I can say, oh, can't connect. And I recommend putting in here the steps to correct. So it might be, like I tried the following. And you just put in all the steps, hopefully correctly spelled. You put in all the steps that it took to actually reproduce the problem. So, step 1. Gosh, I really can't spell today. Step 1. And oh my gosh. Yeah, open blend file, or open Blender, etc. and etc. So you just go through all the steps that you did that make that problem happen. Now do make sure that the steps actually do reproduce the issue. Then any files you want to attach. So one of the big things that really helps is if you attach the log files, and you might be saying to us, but how do I find these log files? Where are they? That's actually quite simple. So if you come back into Blender, and if you open up your user preferences, I'll show you how to do that. File, user preferences, and if you open, first of all, you search for Crowdrender by going Crowdrender. You open up this, and then you'll find here there is a button called Zip Logs. If you press this button, you can save your logs. Now, unfortunately, it comes up with usersave.blend because it thinks this is saving the blend file, so apologies for that. So I would save this as my master computer.zip because it's actually going to save a zip file. And then I would probably put that somewhere that's easy to find, like the desktop. and then I would go zip logs, and then it's done. And then if you go to your desktop, I go to my desktop, I will find that master computer.zip is there. Excellent. And it's pretty chunky, it's 56 megabytes huge. That's because I haven't reset my log files in a while. Okay, so now we can go back to our bug report and I can attach that file. Now I probably won't attach 56 megs because it's just going to take forever and there's nothing particularly groundbreakingly revelationary in my files. So you click open, you'd attach those files, give us your email so we can actually call you back and say, hey, we fixed it, would you like to test it? Because one of the ways we operate is we make sure that if you give us an issue, we fix it, and then we don't close the issue until we've made sure it actually fixes your problem. If you don't give us an email though, then we really can't tell if it's fixed or not, because it's fixed when you tell us, hey, that fixed it, I can use Crowdrender again, not when we just issue a new build. So that's pretty much the process. So let's just recap how you do this. So you click on that form thing, give us a brief sort of summary of the issue, the steps to reproduce it, the log files that you get when you reproduced it yourself. So that kind of gives us at least some record of what happened. One thing to note as well, if it was a connection issue between two computers or any issue involving two computers, make sure you give us the log files from both or all of the computers, not just from one. And then you just hit submit. And that's it. And then we will get an issue posted into our software management system and we can actually action it. And that is definitely the right way to do it. Also, by the time that we've actually released this video, there'll be a full documentation session online, which will link actually back to these videos, but it'll also have some written content as well, and you can read that at your own leisure. So we've pretty much covered it in terms of troubleshooting and support, but just remember guys, we're here to help. If you need to reach out to us on email. We generally try and get back to you within 24 hours. It's a bit tricky with the time zones because we're in Australia, but other than that, we do aim to get back to you and at least sort of say, yep, we've heard you, we know that there's a problem, and we'll fix it. Okay, well that's the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching, and if you got all the way at the end to this bit, watching it the whole way through, big thumbs up to you. Now I want to go ahead and first just say thank you to all of our subscribers and supporters, because you make what we do possible and pleasant. So thanks guys, and I hope that you have a very warm, safe and happy Christmas. Also, if you haven't yet subscribed, please consider doing that. We're making lots of cool things that you might find interesting. You can subscribe to us on Twitter, Facebook, also on YouTube obviously. And you can also subscribe to our website for email updates if you prefer. And that's pretty much it for me. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of whatever you're doing today, and just wish you all the best. Until next time. See ya!